Based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book, Percy the Small Engine, the 7th episode of the second series, Percy and the Signal, is the beginning of the Percy arc for Series 2. Of course, we were introduced to him back in the first series of the show, but we didn't have that much time to see who the character really was. We only got glimpses of his cheeky personality. Well, this series gives us a full blast at Percy, and this episode starts it all. Percy works in the yard, and although he works hard, he can also be very cheeky and often plays jokes. One day, Percy is feeling particularly cheeky. He startles Gordon by telling him that his train is ready, which makes Gordon think he's running late. Percy then pulls out to reveal a line of dirty trucks, which makes Gordon very cross. Gordon begins to think of a way to get back at Percy. Next, Percy goes to James and tells him that the Fat Controller had sent a message for him to stay in the shed until he comes to see him. James is delighted, thinking that the Fat Controller wants him to pull a special and refuses to leave when his driver and fireman try to take him out. As a result, the other engines have to do James's work as well as their own, which makes them very angry. Finally, an engine inspector arrives to find out why James won't leave his shed. James tells him about the message the Fat Controller supposedly sent. The inspector points out that the Fat Controller could not have sent a message as he is away for a week. James is furious, realising he was fooled, and quickly leaves to find Percy, but Percy has disappeared. When the Fat Controller returns, he tells both engines off for causing trouble. Sometime later the next morning, Percy is boasting to Gordon and James that he is taking trucks to Thomas's Junction. He believes that the Fat Controller chose him because he is a really useful engine, though James thinks it's simply to keep him out of the way. Gordon, realising what route Percy has taken, indicates to James that they have a chance to give Percy a taste of his own medicine. They claim they were talking about being careful with the signals at the junction, especially backing signals. Percy, keen to show off, claims that he knows all about signals, but worries as he has never heard of backing signals before. Percy soon arrives at a signal set at danger, but then sees its arm move to line clear. The small green engine is surprised when it moves up instead of down, having never seen anything like it before, and guesses that it's one of the backing signals Gordon and James were discussing. Percy begins reversing and his driver quickly stops him. Percy insists that it is a backing signal and tells him what Gordon and James had said. The driver tells Percy the truth, which makes him eager to leave before he is seen. But Gordon goes past and sees that Percy fell for the trick. Humiliated, the small engine quickly and quietly finishes his work. That night in the sheds, Gordon and James talk about nothing but signals. While they think it is funny, Percy thinks that they're being very silly. As I've said earlier, this episode really shows off Percy's personality compared to what we've seen in the first series. We all knew that he was quite cheeky and a hard worker from the first series, but we've never known to what extent his cheekiness could go to. And this episode reveals it, with him playing pranks on Gordon and James. It's sort of like a mirror to what Thomas was back in his starter days when he was shunting coaches for the big engines. And Sir Ringo Starr gives a wonderful performance as always for this episode. I especially love his performance to when James realises that he's been made a fool of.
Show a wheel, James. You can't stay here all day. The Fat Controller told me to stay here. He sent a message this morning. He did not. How could he? He's away for a week. Oh, said James. Oh, where's Percy?
And I'm very sure that the events of this episode, as well as the book it was based on, was based off of a real life event in railways. But I can't for the life of me figure out what that signal that goes up instead of down is from, so feel free to put a comment below if you know what that's all about, because I sure as hell have no idea. And I'm going to talk about an aspect of Series 2 that I haven't brought up before until this episode, and that's the use of the camera shots and panning. In the first series, we didn't get a lot of panning with the cameras, as the crew was still starting off with the camera work and working out what they could do with their abilities. But here we get panning shots galore. We pan past a big pile of coal before we get to Percy, Gordon and James in the big yards, and in previous episodes we get to see close-up shots of the engines and the camera moves away from them. Since the team have moved to a big studio, they really did test what they could do with the cameras this time around. And this episode's another great example, where it shows us shots of the work in railway yards before we get to the story at hand. David Mitton just did a great use of the camera work here. And this goof that you find in the DVD version isn't exactly a huge deal, but it's a big deal to most fans nonetheless. It's that when the Fat Controller sees James and Percy about what happened with the whole trick thing, in the original version we get a close-up shot of James and then Percy before we cut to the next scene. Although in the DVD remastered version, we skip the scene with Percy entirely and just stay on James. And like with the previous Goof's Hint Entertainment did in the DVD releases, I have no idea what drove them to make this mistake. But like I said, it's just a small detail and it's not nearly as bad as the mistake they made in the remastered version of Cole. Percy and the Signal is another one of those fun episodes where we get no runaways, no chase scenes. It's just a fun episode which shows us more of Percy's personality. And as I said, it's the start of his own story arc going through the series. So I'd highly recommend checking this episode out if you haven't seen it for a while. You'll get some good laughs out of it, you'll get to see more of Percy's personality, and it's just an all-around fun episode to watch. You won't be disappointed with Percy's antics.